we've talked all about the ways that sex might have been communicated or modeled to us in unhealth, we can't close out this series without discussing what represents healthy sexuality.
Welcome to the Sifted Wheat Podcast with Leslie Lamb, a counselor by profession, a minister of truth, and a lover of people. This is a safe place where she sets a path for others to learn how to move through hard seasons with confidence and grace, encouraging your faith, empowering your choices, and challenging your perceptions through the Word, the wisdom from years of counseling others, and her own experience of being sifted. Here's Leslie.
As I was sitting down with this topic and asked myself, what constitutes healthy sexuality? The first word that came to mind was respect. Any depiction of God-ordained sexuality in the Word always respects the other person. Even in spaces where the other person, in these cases, the woman, is exploring her options and seeking pleasure outside of her marriage, the response of the man instructed by God is to love her. Stories that are infamously related to sexuality, like the story of Hosea and Gomer, the ongoing analogy of God and Israel, and the most quoted book of romance and sexual affection, the Song of Solomon, all give images of respect and care in the space of physical intimacy. Read them for yourselves, and you will see in each of those spaces, the man was instructed to love and cherish and not ravage or assault or even pressure a woman to submit to his sexual needs. There is this safety and tenderness that says, I'm not seeking to possess you, but to be loved by you and reveal my love to you. Isn't that the overarching message of the gospel? But when you read about pagan practices, the comparison of sexuality on a cultural landscape versus in the holiness it was intended, we see very different expectations and practices. Those engagements are about possessing and owning and being ravaged. Those messages of physical connection are not tender or affectionate, but rather lustful and carnal, moving them out of intimacy and into sexual mechanics alone. Even the first couple, Adam and Eve, it says in Genesis 4 that he had relations with her. This word denotes knowledge, care, consideration. And each consequent child that comes from that is in this intimate space of knowing and caring and considering until you get to Genesis 6. And something significantly shifts. It says, the sons of God took for themselves the daughters of man. That word took denotes to seize, take away, and to use. Whereas up until that point, women were to be known, considered, and cared for, this great interruption shifts their value, and suddenly they are desired and seen and captured and impregnated. I don't think we fully understand what all that meant for humanity, but we know that 1, God was aware, and 2, he despised what it did to us. It moved us from a race of people just outside of Eden into a corrupted race of humanity that was continuously evil and where every thought was violent. And God basically said, enough is enough. I am grieved. I can't let this continue. That word grieved is atzab, and it literally means to carve out. God was so heartbroken at what had happened to his people because of their misuse sexually that his heart, or the center of his being, was carved out from sorrow and pain. Let's sit in that a moment. Have you felt that level of what we might call gut-wrenching pain? That is what God felt before he sent the flood. And yet, 40 days and 40 nights later or thereabout, sin re-entered the world. I heard someone say, well, it was the wives of the sons. They were pagans. I'm not sure. First of all, I'm really skeptical of any teaching that vilifies women. But also, Genesis tells us that sin comes through the seed of man, which is why the release of an unproductive seed was considered unclean. And the evidence of sexual perversion resurfaces in a moment of drunkenness of Noah, where his sons expose his nakedness and bring shame to their father. Look, I don't want to get in the weeds with this because there is so much that we could pull out of that one story, but I want to emphasize, at one point, what was sincere and intimate and connected became sensual and forceful and destructive. And I guess my questions of the last few weeks have been my exploration of getting back on track with our sexuality. The second thing that I see necessary for healthy sexuality is holiness. Please don't tune me out, but we have to consider that healthy sexuality started with God. Holiness is separateness. In order to engage true healthy sexuality, not as the world defines it, but as it was intended, it has to be separate from culture and what is commonly accepted. And if our response is to simply separate God from the topic or the practice, we can do that, but it won't be healthy to the body in the ways that it was intended. Because like we saw before, to separate him from sexuality is to move away from life and health into destruction. Don't believe me? Name the diseases and infections that result from monogamous one-partner heterosexual relationships. I'll wait. The reality is, even if you can name something that I can't presently think of, we don't have time to name all the diseases and infections that result from unprotected, multi-partner, multi-gender sexual engagements. Sure, we have medications and treatments, but we don't have the absence of infection or disease. That's not my opinion. That is science. Research it for yourself. You don't have to like the evidence, but you should at least consider critically that the impact of our sexual choices does bear weight in our bodies. The third thing that is representative of healthy sexuality is that it is the outcome of healthy platonic intimacy. And if that is a new term for you, then you need to listen to the episode right before this, where Dr. Brooke and I broke that down. I mentioned in that conversation that when my husband and I were struggling due to my own trauma and false messages of sexuality, one of the best things we did was take sex off the table. God bless my husband, because when it was discussed, I gave no timeline, no hopeful outlook for how long that might be. And one of the things that rebuilt trust more than anything else was that he respected that agreement and didn't push those boundaries, but waited in love and gentleness, showing me that he valued my personality, my nearness, and my safety more than his physical needs. In turn, our expectations of one another shifted. Our relationship built, our friendship improved, and now he is the safest person in my life. And I can't imagine ever being married to another soul. And it wasn't the goal, but with those assurances and that safety and intimacy, our sexuality was restored and better than I ever believed was possible. We took the time to love one another without the pressure and temptation of sex, and it has made all the difference in our relationship. We've talked a lot in this series about intimacy and false intimacy. It can get confusing, but I'm hoping as we sort through false intimacy, we can make our way back to true intimacy and connection that reveals who we are as people and not just seeking to engage and fulfill our physical needs. Healthy sexuality is the fruit of true intimacy. Into me, see. It's the invitation to be known and to be seen sexually after being known and seen spiritually. It's the depth of connection that explores and seeks to know your partner and to be known in the same way. One of the ways that I encourage couples to re-engage intimacy is to lay down on their sides, face directly, and look at one another eye to eye and relate what they feel and what they see. It's uncomfortable. You can't hide under the covers or turn out the lights. You must experience the moment of being seen and seeing. But it does something. It breaks off the shadow of false intimacy and reveals the value that the relationship actually holds. It builds safety and encourages closeness without expectation. It fosters communication, including even the honest confession of tension that can be felt and seen when the other is truly identifying body language and responding respectfully to what it is saying. It takes several experiences to work through the awkwardness to get to the intimacy, but it is worth the time to get there. So I ask you, where are you? Are you engaging unhealthy sexuality, where more often than not you feel depleted and taken from rather than cherished and known? Or even more significant, do you believe that is the sex you need to be aroused? This can be a sign of trauma and requires support from a counselor to work through and to heal. Do you struggle with body pain and issues connected to sexual activities which feel shameful or concerning? Can you engage your partner while acknowledging God's presence? Or does it feel shameful and you seek to hide even though it is within the union of your marriage? Are you known and seen by your partner or often feel like a means to an end? My heart goes out to you wherever you find yourself, because I've been there. And honestly, I'm still healing in this area. Nothing is going to change overnight. It takes time and attention and intention to get back to healthy sexuality. But you're not in it alone. I'm right there with you. And countless other brothers and sisters in Christ are praying for you, encouraging you, supporting you, and holding a line of faith that says better is before you. We can't move on from this topic without seeing that we are not alone. As long as the Lord keeps the door open for me to do this podcast, we will be engaging the testimonies of others who have experienced and are healing in some of the very areas we've discussed in the last few weeks. I hope you'll follow and subscribe and choose to listen in and hear how the power of testimony can encourage your healing. Maybe you would like to share your story of sexuality and where you're healing and finding freedom. I welcome you to email me at siftedwheatpodcast@gmail.com. I truly believe we are in this together, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the good news is that Jesus shows up in all of it, and we are honored to follow him there. Until then, process, explore, and reflect. And in so doing, learn the art of healthy sexuality and break off the bondage of an unhealthy sexualized culture inside and outside of the church.